guys, welcome to CADS 3853 module number 3. In this module, we're going to talk about more strategic aspect of pricing. Pricing is a very important tool for retailers. It's a very strong competitive tool if you use well, and it's very frequently used competitive tool. However, it can be a dangerous tool as well, especially when you get into a price wall type of thing with your competitors. It could lead to a lose-lose situation for all retailers involved. Pricing directly affects sales revenues because the markups, how much markup you apply, determines whether the customers will really like the price or not. Also, the markdowns, if you use markdowns really wisely, you may be able to track a lot of traffic in your store, which will increase your sales. So, but also if you don't use the markdowns really well in an effective way, then you may end up reducing your sales as well. So pricing, whether it's through markups or markdowns, affects directly your sales revenues. Therefore, it has a trickle-down impact on your bottom line profit. When a retailer selects a pricing strategy, there are a lot of factors that they need to think about, right? In terms of the tangibles, financially, you have to think about what will be the cost of merchandise, right? How much operating expenses you will need, okay? And how much profit you expect to have, you want to have, okay? And given the kinds of customers, target customers you're dealing with, how much markdowns or discounts, overall reductions you will have to assure to be able to boost the sales, right? Those kind of financial aspects of it, you have to have good predictions about and accurate predictions about what may be the cost of goods sold percentage, what operating expense percent you will need to assure that your price will cover, and how much profit, profit percentage that your price will have to cover, and how much reductions you anticipate, those kind of things. But there are also some intangible factors. For example, the competition. Okay, what are their strategies? Okay, that we cannot ignore competitors' pricing strategies when we decide on our strategies. And also store location. Well, if you are in a location where there are lots of competitions, obviously you have to be more keen to your competitors' move. But if you are in a very exclusive location where you don't find a lot of competition, that will be a situation where you don't have to be as careful in terms of the pricing. Also, where your store is located. So who are the surrounding stores? What are they dealing with? What kind of products they're dealing with? Because the entire group of stores in the same location attracts a certain type of a clientele, certain type of customers, right? So if your stores are placed in a neighborhood where there are a lot of kind of low, inexpensive item kind of merchandise stores, then it is likely that the area is going to attract more people who are seeking for lower prices. In that case, you have to go with a lower pricing strategy. So when you decide on the store location itself, you have to think about what your pricing strategy is and find the location that matches your pricing strategy. Or if you had found the location first, then you have to mold your pricing strategy to meet the kind of expectation for the clientele that the store location is implicating. And as I mentioned earlier, in both for markups and markdown discussions, the nature of merchandise, how fashionable or how basic this merchandise is, in the store, how many percent of the items are actually fashionable merchandise, and how many percent is actually basic merchandise, things like that. So you have to think about the pricing strategy going with that. The type of merchandise you're dealing with, whether the merchandise requires a lot of care, or the merchandise is kind of more exclusive, things like that. And finally, we also need to think about what price means to our target consumers. Okay, sometimes our target consumers' price sensitivities can be very different, right? For certain stores, they have really low price sensitivity, which means even if you go up in the price, their demand is not going to go down as much. Whereas for certain type of merchandise or stores, the target consumers are very sensitive to the pricing, so that with a slight raise in the price, the demand can plummet. Things like that. Also in certain cases, the price sensitivity actually goes in the reverse way, in a sense that the customers actually look for higher price items, and they like the item better if the price is high. Like luxury products and luxury brands will be the typical case, where if you actually drop the price, the demand or the sales actually drops as well. So you have to completely understand what price actually means to your customers. Okay, whether do they associate price with quality? So if you go down with the price, that really negatively impact the quality perception of your customers, which will lead to negative impact on the sales. Or that your customers are really seeking low price items, they're really economic kind of shoppers. In that case, a little bit of raise in the price can really impact negatively to your sales. So the impact can be all different depending on the meaning of the price to your target customers, and as well as their price sensitivity. So you have to think about those things when we select a pricing strategy for our stores. So when determining pricing strategies, we have to specifically plan different pricing components. We will have to plan our market price position, price lining strategies, price ending strategies. Also have to think about the role of our first price, what that means to our customers, and what role do we want markdowns to play in our stores, and what kind of advertising strategies we are going to utilize in advertising prices. All these kind of things. Let's take a look at each component one by one. First, let's talk about market price positions. We could position our store or our brand at either below market price position, or at market price position, or above market price position. The below market price position basically means that we decide to rely on high sales volumes to meet our profit goal. So we want to sell a lot at low prices. Okay. If we go with this type of price position, that means that we have to control our expenses very tightly, because our gross margin is going to be very small, right? We're going to put a really low margin on top of our cost, so that we cannot afford to spend a lot on our operating expenses if we want to make any profit, right? So the low price, high sales volume, that price position strategy directly leads to our expenses strategy as well. What would be some example of existing real-world retailers that would go with this below market price position strategy? Typical example that comes to our mind probably would be like Walmart. They clearly say they are aiming at always low prices, everyday low prices and things like that. When they go for things like that, they want to sell a lot and want to cater to more customers and at low prices, which means they have to really tightly control their expenses. And you see that their stores not all that fancy or anything like that. A lot of the things at the atmosphere is pretty basic, right? Spend less money on decorating the stores, and as well as the sales staff. And you may not see a lot of sales staff, and most services are self-services, and all those kind of things are hand in hand with the price position strategies they're taking. Another type of market price position that a retailer can take is the at market price position. At market basically means you're kind of comparable to other retailers at market, right? So it's kind of the middle price position that we can think about. Like in this case, you're gonna actually have a lot of competitors, right? So your strategy is to rely on the reputation for good quality merchandise at moderate prices. Tend to have a lot of competitors, so that your shoppers, your target customers may do a lot of comparison shopping. So how can we make them not be able to compare us with other competitors, retailers? And that is kind of the key point of operation this at market price position retailers are focusing on. A lot of the at market price position retailers utilize private labels. That means they are producing their merchandise under their own private label brand name. so that the offers are unique, so that even if similar things may be found in other competitor stores, they're not coming from the same brand name, so that the direct comparison, price comparison between between the retailers may become a little bit harder for customers. Okay, so that you can actually put the kind of price that you want, and you may avoid a direct comparison that may lead to like a price war type thing among the competitors. What would be some example of real world retailers who are at market positions? Yeah, Dillard's, JCPenney, Macy's. We can think about a lot of different retailers who probably sell their merchandise at moderate prices and pretty good quality. They may not be the most prestigious kind of retailers, or they may not deal with the most luxury kind of prestigious brand, but they've got pretty good quality products, right? And they tend to have a lot of private labels too, that are just sold exclusively in their own stores, and designed and produced by their own staff, so that customers will not be able to find those private label products in other stores, right? Then how about the above market price position? Right? There are certain retailers that we can clearly imagine who rely on more high quality, exclusive reputation, and they always located in a premium location and surrounded by other above market price position retailers, and they're very much emphasis is on the luxury ambience and pleasant atmosphere and things like that, and they emphasize excellence of services. Their services are more personalized. Those kind of things. Those all these factors are actually adding to the expenses, right? They're spending a lot of money to create this ambience and services and all these things, so that their price has to be definitely above the market price and high, so that the merchandise prices can cover all the cost of merchandise, of this high quality merchandise, as well as all the other operating expenses that they need to spend to maintain the quality service as well as the atmosphere, right? What are some of the examples of real world retailers who would fit this above market price positions? Yeah, among department stores, maybe Saks Fifth Avenue and Neiman Marcus might be some examples, right? Their price ranges may be a little bit higher than what we may see at Dillard's or Macy's. Um, but also, there are a lot of specialty retail stores, like the luxury brand stores that deal with only their own private label brand, and their emphasis is on excellent services and with great ambience, atmosphere, and premium location and all those kind of things. Their merchandise prices are really high, but that also comes with expectations from the consumer's perspective. So all those things kind of come together, right? So we just took a look at market price positions, and now let's talk about price lining strategies. Okay, I kind of mentioned this term earlier in the previous two modules before, I think. A price line means a specific price points, and price lining itself basically refers to the practice of offering merchandise at a limited number of specific price points. So deciding on these price points for each class of merchandise itself will be called price lining. Price lining, as I said before, results in selling items of different costs for the same price, right? So for example, let's say you decided to sell shirts for $13.99, $19.99, or $24.99. So that means in your store, all shirts are sold for one of these prices. They're not going to be any $20 shirts. They're not going to be any $40 shirt. They're not going to be any $15 shirt, because every shirt is going to be either $13.99 or $19.99 or $24.99. If you decide this type of price lining, then you may buy specifically for this price point, right? Price line, and you may buy certain shares at the $5 or $4, $6 as a buyer, but you may all lump them together and retail them for $13.99, right? So they are the same price from the consumer's perspective, but the costs were different from the retailer's perspective. Some retailers may go for price range policies so that they have some spread of prices from the lowest price to the highest price line they carried. So like for dresses, we're going to carry between $19 and $99, something like that. So you decide on this range of prices. Another term that we also want to know about price lining is what the term called price zones. A price zone basically means a grouping of price lines. So a few specific price points, price lines, will be grouped together to constitute a zone. Okay, this price zone is likely to appeal to a specific group of the store's customers, and a store may have like several price zones that reflect differences in the merchandise quality and values and things like that. For example, in each store, they may decide to carry actually 3 different zones, price zones for a type of item class for dresses, for example, right? And then they may decide, okay, we're going to have the promotional zone, which is kind of a little bit lower price, volume zone, which is the most highest volume sales zone, and the prestige zone. So prestige means the more like luxury type of items in the store. Depending on the store, depending on the retailer, you may define this promotional versus volume versus prestige zones in different way, including a different price ranges for each of these zones. But in any store, chances are you're going to be able to see some more exceptionally more expensive items, considering the kind of the typical type of merchandise and value that you expect from the store. And then there are a bunch of items that are in the typical range of prices that you expect from the store. And then there are always this like items that are unexpectedly lower prices than the typical price that you will find from the store. So that's kind of having a 3 zones and zoning strategies. Alright, let's take a look at an example for an illustration of all these terms. Okay, let's say we decided that in this store, jackets will be in these price lines. $15, $18, $22, $25, $30, $35, $40, $45, $50, $75, $10, $100. And that's kind of a lot of price lines. But let's say this is what we decided, price points or price lines. And let's say the buyer decided that, okay, in this among these price lines, 25 to 45 is where the largest percentage of sales will occur. So that's what our volume zone. So we're going to make most purchases for these price lines in this volume zone. And then we're going to have this 15 to 22 as our promotional zone. These are not our most kind of user kind of merchandise, but we want to have some merchandise in this lower ends price lines so that we can attract some of the economic shoppers who may usually not try out, may not be our main target customers, but eventually in the future when they have more money they may become our target customers. So we want to kind of give them the taste of our merchandise, something like that, right? So that's promotional zone. So we're not going to make a whole lot of purchases for this zone, but we're going to have some, right? And then we may decide that, okay, from between $50 and $100, that would be our prestige zone. So we're not going to again have a whole lot of merchandise in this zone, but we want to have some so that we can kind of maintain some of the nicer kind of image of our brand or our store, so that some of the people who want to have a little bit more kind of toned up type of products, then they would be able to go to and purchase some things from these price zones. So this would be kind of representing the tone off in this assortment of the store. So we can see the price zoning strategies, but again, for each zone, there's certain price range that's determined. 15 to 22 represent promotional zone, 25 to 45 represent the volume zone, 50 to 100 represent the prestige zone. So we can also see the price range strategies. in this scenario, the store is not going to carry any jackets that are like $20, $31. You're not going to see that, right? You're going to see only the ones that are specified in these price lines. So a store may have a price range policy that determines, the specific price zones based on the store's image and where they want to put the volume and prestige or promotional zones within their store. Every store will determine different price ranges for these price zones. And a retail may have a price line policy, which is to establish the specific price points for each item class that they are carrying. And some store may have an extreme version of a price line policy that they actually decide only one price point to be used for all items that they're carrying. So the same price is charged to everyone who buys the same item in a certain quantity. So you're kind of making sure that everything that's going to be sold in that store is going to be in that same price. That extreme example is maybe like dollar store. Everything is kind of lumped in certain quantities so that everything will be kind of considered as $1 or somewhere close to $1, right? Something like that. Another component of pricing strategy is the price endings. There could be odd price endings versus even price endings. Odd price endings basically means the price ends with like 99 cents. Okay, the even price endings means the price is all in whole dollar level. Okay, so like $99, $98, etc. Traditionally, odd price endings are associated with lower priced goods, whereas even price endings are associated with higher quality goods, more luxury items, or luxury brands or luxury stores. For retailers who are usually using even price endings for their regularly priced items, maybe with the markdowns, they may actually switch from the even price endings to odd price endings to indicate, to kind of symbolize like a lower price or better deals into the customers. It is unclear whether it is this tactics that the retailer used made consumers associate these price endings to this quality perceptions, or due to the psychology of human beings, we tend to associate these odd endings to a lower quality. That's why retailers utilize that to decide on their price ending strategies, to kind of cater to this different psychology of human beings. Whichever is the first, it's kind of like a chicken egg question that we don't know. But whatever the initiation it was, right now in most cases these perceptions or stereotypes are existing in the market, and consumers do associate more lower price goods and lower quality goods to more like a odd price, and then when they see those things they feel like it's better deal. Whereas when they see a whole dollar price tag, they feel like it is more higher quality. So depending on the kind of consumers your retail store is trying to cater to, you will have to determine whether your odd price ending would be a better strategy or even price ending would be a better strategy for your regularly priced items. Even if you may go for the odd price endings for all like sales items, discounted items, but for the regularly priced items, you kind of have to decide on this. Most specialty stores that want to portray some nice, kind of images, they will go with the even price endings. And like a store that are at the below market price position, and they want to portray the image that their merchandise is cheap, then they would definitely go with the odd price endings. When we determine price strategies, and we also have to understand what's the role of the first price, or original retail price, or the initial retail price is. The first price is the original retail price that we planned when we purchased the item. We have a plan in terms of how much this item will be retailed at in our store, right? But between the time that you make the purchase and the time that you actually get the merchandise in your store and start to sell, there could be some things that may happen in between those times that may make you change your idea about what would be the appropriate regular price that should be put on the tag. Okay, so the first price or the original retail price that you originally planned may not be exactly the same always as the price that you put on the tag that the customer will see. Okay, but this first price or original retail price that you plan is going to be used as a basis for additional markup for in case you decide to put a price premium, so that you actually charge a higher price than you originally planned retail price as the first price for your customer. That may happen. The first price is going to be used as a basis for your markdown decisions or any promotional for sales or clearances. And in some cases, as I said before, customers may never get to see the first price or the original retail price. Okay, the first price they're going to see is going to be the regular price that you put on the tag, and that may not be the first price from the retailer's perspective. Well, let's take a look at an example that illustrates this case, the difference between the retailer view and the customer view of the first price. Let's say for a jacket, the retailer decided that or planned the first price to be $100. Okay, but by the time they actually got the jacket in the store, they realized that there is no other competitors around them who carry that jacket, and that jacket is really looking good, and it became really in trend, between the time that you purchased it and the time that you got it in the store. So now you think it's going to sell, even if you charge a little bit higher price than the first price that you planned. So that you decided to put an additional markup of 10% on top of the first price, so that your premium price is going to be 110. Okay, that 110 is going to be the ticket price. So the ticket price, the price that is also actually put on the price ticket, is going to be 110, and from the customer's point of view, that 110 is their regular price that they're seeing. So let's say as the season goes by, you decided to take some markdowns. So let's say an average markdown that you took was 20%. Okay, and again, the markdown is determined based on the first price you planned. So out of $100, you took a 20% off. So the average selling price might have been like $80, something like that. So from the retailer's point of view, you took a 20% markdown. However, from the customer's point of view, that is 27% markdown. Right? From 110, it's 27% special markdown to lead to the sale price of $80. Okay, the same $80 is viewed as differently, so that you may actually advertise this to be 27% markdown when in actuality it was 20% markdown from your book. And let's say later in the season you decided to take a clearance markdown to just clear what's left unsold in the store. So you took further markdown, so 50.5% markdown, leading to the clearance price of $49.5. Okay. In that case, from the customer's view, it will be like a 55% clearance markdown. Again, they're paying $49.5 as a clearance price. So internally, from the retailer's perspective, because of the premium price and additional markup they applied, their ticket price and their first price became different. From the customer's point of view, the ticket price is the regular price that the first price they are seeing, so that when you advertise the prices, the special markdown or clearance markdown and things like that, the retailer will use the markdown percentages based on the customer's regular price, but it may be different from what the retailers originally planned. Alright, so next component of pricing strategy is obviously markdowns. The role of markdowns could be different depending on the type of retailer you are. And typical roles of markdown could be broken down into 3 categories. The first one, you could use markdowns to manage your inventory, by getting rid of, poor sellers and make room for new merchandise and things like that. Or you may utilize markdowns to actually track a lot of customers in the store that usually may not come in your store, right? So the sales promotion is your purpose. So you try to mark down and advertise it so that even the shoppers who are price sensitive and maybe usually not the regular target customers of your stores could be coming in, so that you can actually boost your sales. It might be as a result of a response to your competitors' sales, that kind of thing. The third role of markdowns you can consider is financial management. And I mentioned that before, that the open to buy or OTB as the dollar budget that you have for purchasing the merchandise, right? So you may not really have a lot of poor sellers, and you may not feel a whole lot of need to promote your sales because your sales are going well, but you feel like you want to buy some new merchandise because you just found really nice things that would boost your store image and would really work well with your target customers in the market. But you want to buy them, but you don't have enough open to buy that you can spend. So for the financial management purpose, you may want to mark down what the existing merchandise or some selected merchandise that exists in the store, so that you can free up the open to buy dollar, the budget that you can spend more for more merchandise, because the open to buy is calculated based on how much retail value of inventory you have on hand. So by marking things down, you are reducing the current price, the retail prices of the current inventory, and essentially it is reducing the value of the current inventory. So it looks like you don't have as much merchandise, so that you can utilize that much gap to purchase new merchandise to increase the inventory value again, right? So depending on the different retailers, you may utilize markdowns for more inventory management purposes, or sales promotion purposes, or financial management purposes. I guess all retailers will utilize markdowns for all of these three roles or purposes, but the proportions of in which they are utilizing these purposes may be slightly different. Okay. When your markdowns are more for the purpose of sales promotions, so it could be like a more temporary markdowns that to attract some new shoppers and things like that. They must be advertised to be effective. If they don't get advertised, then you're not going to actually fulfill the purpose of promoting sales. Okay, because not a lot of people will know about it, and so you can only cater to people who happen to be in your store and who happen to see your the markdowns. So for temporary markdowns, for them to be effective, if you want to really have a huge impact on sales, then you would have to advertise. Okay? But large end of season markdown events are obviously generally advertised because this is last chance you can get rid of your merchandise, right? So for the inventory management purposes, you usually do large end of season clearance markdowns. In that case, usually you advertise them so that it would be most impactful. But really frequent in-season markdowns on selected items, okay, so that they're not really, your purpose is not really to big promotion of sales and to attract a lot of traffic into the stores or something like that. Those things tend to be not advertised as much, just for like selected items. So you are perfectly fine with just having some customers who happen to be in the store who notice the markdown to buy them. Then you don't have to advertise. So in this module, we've taken a look at different components of a pricing strategies. What are the kinds of things that we need to think about in terms of market price position, price ending, the role of first price, or the role of markdowns, and advertising of pricings, and all these different kinds of things. In conclusion, the price is a critical element that affects profit because it affects the net sales, as I said before. But one thing that we need to definitely keep in mind in determining our pricing strategies is that different customers respond to price levels in different ways. So we must understand our target customers' price sensitivity and what price means to them for us to determine whether we should go for at market position, below market position, those market price position, or odd ending would be better, or even ending would be better, those kind of things, and how much additional markup we can put. Is it okay to put additional markup, and all those kind of aspect of it. Alright, thank you for listening. This concludes Module 13 lecture. Please work on module problem assignment number 13. In this module, we didn't really deal with merchandising math problems, so this module problem is not going to be coming from necessarily this particular module per se, but it's going to be a continuation from last module, which was about markdowns, right? Net markdown and calculation and things like that. But in this module practice problem, segment number 13, you're going to be asked to utilize Excel spreadsheet to work on some markdown problems. So I hope that will allow you to practice some Excel a little bit more too. All right, thank you for listening again. Bye bye.